Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's briefing sessions. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge this land that we meet on today is the traditional lands for the Kaurna people and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Adelaide region and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. Tonight we have two briefings. Firstly, it's around the proposed closure of Melaleuca Drive, and our Senior Traffic Engineer Richard Frimpong will lead that presentation. And then after that one, we do have a presentation from Tori Watson around our community engagement charter and policy that we need to have as a result of local government reforms. So I'll let Richard run through the Melaleuca Drive presentation. Over to you.
All right, excellent. Thanks, David. All right, so just for those that are... All right, thank you. Can everyone hear me at the back of the chamber? Yep, excellent. I suppose for those that don't know me, my name is Richard Frimpong. I'm the Senior Traffic Engineer at Town of Gawler. The purpose of today's briefing session is we're going to run through an options assessment for Melaleuca Drive. As a bit of context, this has come about as a result of the design works for the proposed roundabout at the intersection of Carlton Road and Cheek Avenue. And I suppose I'll run through a little bit of the history. We have done a bit of a detailed options assessment and undertaken some pretty early engagement with emergency services and the Northern Adelaide Waste Management Authority. And I suppose based on that, we've come up with a recommended option that we'll talk through. And then I suppose what the next steps are going forward as well. So I guess just as a little bit of a background, so the current intersection of Cheek Avenue and Carlton Road presently operates as a four-way intersection. Carlton Road facilitates about 5,500 vehicles a day. Cheek Avenue carries about 2,500 vehicles a day. And the Melaleuca Drive intersection is approximately 35 metres north of that intersection. I suppose just a little bit of data behind that intersection. While it's a four-way intersection and generally four-way intersections are undesirable, this particular intersection at present doesn't have any reported crash history from 2020 to 2024. However, just even though the crash volumes aren't there presently, as you increase the traffic volume, that does increase the propensity or the risks that are associated with four-way intersections. So I suppose what was always envisaged at this intersection, and I suppose many are aware of it, was a roundabout. I suppose this was identified in the 2017 Traffic Interventions Assessment. There was an original design that was actually put forward back in 2022, 2023 that was actually consulted on. The scale and size of that roundabout was, a local roundabout. So the scale and size of it was quite small. And actually through that, at the time, we actually did undertake a Section 32 process. For those that don't know what that is, that's effectively a process that facilitates the closure of a road. And in this case here, because Cheek Avenue from the southern approach links to Carlton Road, we had to undertake that consultation process to close that small link of road, because as a part of the Springwood development, there's a new road link that's going to connect from Cheek Avenue that connects down through to Schomburg Drive. And when this roundabout was proposed, there was no announcement or investigations that had commenced in relation to the Concordia infrastructure scheme. So I suppose many people have probably seen this concept as it's been released as part of the Concordia infrastructure scheme. But I suppose a bit of an overview, I think in the Concordia infrastructure scheme there was about 12,000 new dwellings. Obviously quite a significant amount of traffic would be generated by that Concordia infrastructure scheme, and there's a whole list and array of interventions that has been identified as part of that scheme. A few of those interventions are effectively along this Cheek Avenue and McMillan Parade road corridor, which includes two roundabouts, a signalised intersection at Lindock and Cheek, and upgrades along the mid-block of that section as well. I suppose what's sort of been circulated in the Concordia infrastructure scheme was a design that was prepared by AECOM, who were basically the DHARD's traffic consultants. which showed a larger roundabout in scale, which had impacts on Melaleuca Drive. And I think at the time it was shown as having like a one-way slip lane going into Melaleuca Drive and the closure of Melaleuca at the time. I suppose this document was put together, I think, back on the 15th of January, back in 2026. And I suppose since then there's sort of been further design progressions that have occurred, particularly at the roundabout, because obviously that's a pretty early intervention because it's already been identified to facilitate Springwood Stage 8, which I'll just briefly go through. So I suppose council are working quite closely with Spire on the detailed design. The diagram that's sort of shown on there is just an indication of what the roundabout size and scale is here. So it has, again, shrunk a little bit from the previous image, but it's larger than what was proposed back in 2023. But I suppose despite its size, there's still, I guess, a material impact on Melaleuca Drive. And these are basically controlled by a couple of key components. So the first one is that the vehicle swept paths are too tight. So what I mean by that effectively is that if the road corridor shifts closer to that existing road corridor, it basically, from Melaleuca Drive, if you're trying to get out, you're effectively to do the U-turn, you're potentially crossing that centre line. Additional to that, there's limitations around where services can go, future shared path links, utilities, and one that's probably not that quite visible from this screen, just is the vertical challenges. So generally when you build a roundabout, you generally try and sort of build the roundabout centre a little bit higher to try and sort of help with drainage elements. But then there's a bit of a level differential between where the existing road of Melaleuca is and the roundabout design for Cheek Avenue and Carlton Road. So I suppose through that design process, while the best of intention was to try and keep the existing access from Melaleuca onto Cheek, it just wasn't viable. I suppose because that's not viable, what we've looked at, I suppose, is a number of different options for whether an alternative access could be located on Carlton Road or whether you provide a new access at all. So we looked at a number of different options. Either way, to go through that process, because you're closing a road, effectively that triggers what we call a Section 32 process under the Road Traffic Act, where ultimately we then go through pretty detailed consultation, which obviously includes the earlier consultation that we've had with Norma, which we'll go through, followed by consultation with residents, which will happen over the next month. And I suppose a key component of that is as well as a resolution is required from council as part of that process, which again I'll go through in a bit more detail. So as it relates to the Section 32 proposal, basically council has investigated 4 access options locations along Carlton Road. We're going to go through those in a bit of detail tonight and some of the investigations that have come from it. Again, we've undertaken a lot of technical rigour ourselves and received a lot of advice as well from those emergency services, Norma and the consultant. And even though we haven't engaged in formal consultation, we have received some feedback already in relation to the proposed changes, which I've also sort of factored as well as part of the discussion tonight. But when we go out to consultation formally, that obviously gives the opportunity as well for residents to give feedback that we can look at and consider as well. The options that we're going to talk through tonight is, I'm going to call them option 1, option 2, option 3 and option 4. So option 1 is basically a 2-way access that's located roughly approximately between the boundary line of 2 Cheek Avenue and 1B Melaleuca Drive. You'll see what that looks like in terms of context. The second option as well is a 2-way access opposite Coast Shell Drive. The third one is a 2-way access. It's basically about 35 metres offset from Coast Shell Drive, but towards sort of the back fence of number 2. And then a new access, no access at all, which basically just means that the single access on Carlton Road is maintained. So we'll go through all of those options in detail, as well as some of the rigour and assessment that's gone behind that. So option 1 basically is a two-way access located roughly about 35 metres from the proposed roundabout. So through that process, we engaged with all those emergency services. They provided feedback in terms of what they foreseed some of the challenges to be, and on top of that as well, I put my own comments in there about what my thoughts are. So as it relates to Norma, this was their preferred option. This was largely driven by Norma vehicles being able to easily get into Melaleuca Drive, continue down the road, they'd service the properties on the northern side, and then they'd exit out at the other end. So that was why they listed it as their preferred. We also spoke with SA Ambulance and SA Health. They've flagged that they're concerned about the proximity of the access to the roundabout. The MFS did actually mention that concern around the proximity to the roundabout, but didn't necessarily say that they were opposed to it. From my perspective when looking at it, basically the sightlines are achieved in terms of where the access is located. However, there's potential impacts on vegetation as well, which also needs to be factored into this equation. Again, the swept paths were also checked for this as well. And again, I acknowledge that because of the proximity to the roundabout, that it might not be the best, but it still meets a lot of technical requirements as well. Option 2 looked at an access point that directly went opposite Coshell Drive. Again, we went through that same process with Norma and the emergency services. And again, I provided a bit more of my notes as well behind it. From Norma's perspective, they don't support it. A large reason why they don't support it is that effectively for them, it basically requires them to try and come in from Coshell Drive, do a left turn, and then to access the properties at the other end, they basically have to reverse back into a four-way intersection. So that's primarily where their concern is. SA Ambulance, they looked at it as a preferable location, largely because, again, it's easy access in and out from Coshell and provides a more direct link to properties that are nearby. MFS, again, have said, look, it's a manageable situation, but again, they generally deal with a lot of emergency situations and have to adjust. Look, from my perspective, I've identified a lot of issues in terms of where existing services are, the fact that it's a four-way intersection. So as part of the Gawler Integrated Transport Strategy that we put together, one of the recommendations in there was to try and limit or reduce four-way intersections where possible. So even though the traffic volumes are quite low on Melaleuca Drive, I think the introduction of a new four-way is generally not preferred, even if those volumes are quite low. Another thing to sort of mention as well is that there's an existing Stobie pole that sits directly opposite that intersection. So if you were to potentially look at putting an access point through there, you're either potentially looking at relocating that Stobie pole, which is quite a substantial cost, or alternatively is trying to design an access around it. But then you also then have a lot of restrictions in terms of how people move, or if the given where the Stobie pole is located, it might look a little bit, it's probably not proper terminology, but a little bit funky. And look, while I suppose it's important to not acknowledge that during some of the early consultation that we have received from residents, a lot have sort of inferred that that's a preferred approach, and I understand why, because largely it provides a convenient and direct access back to Carlton Road. But again, that introduction of a four-way, just in my view, is not ideal. Option 3 is potentially looking at an access point roughly around sort of 35 to 40 metres away from Coshell Drive, just to the east. I'll just go through each of the different parties' advice again. So generally speaking, all the different agencies are actually reasonably amenable to it, and MFS actually preferred it, although when I say that, they just didn't flag any issues with that option as opposed to some of the other options. So maybe saying preferred is maybe a little bit too strong, but they more or less said that they can manage that. From my perspective, I do think that this is a much more preferred scenario, and I'll run through the reasons why. So the first one is that from an access perspective, it's reasonably well set away from the roundabout. While I suppose we've had designers and consultants that have provided advice saying that yes, it does meet all these technical requirements, I'm trying to look at it from a perspective of if we can achieve further separation from the roundabout and minimise potential conflicts, then that's what we should be looking for. Swept paths generally work reasonably well. The only limitation is some of your larger fire vehicles being able to do a U-turn manoeuvre, but the MFS were very helpful in providing us with a lot of their appliance details and when they don't use them. And generally they generally have appliances that are mostly within about sort of 9 metres of length, and most of those vehicles can still perform that turn. It's generally when you're talking about 12, 13 metre trucks, but those are generally more aerial appliances which are used for sort of more higher level or higher story properties, which wouldn't be the case here for Melaleuca. I suppose we haven't really received, again, because we haven't formally consulted with residents yet, we haven't really sort of received any sort of feedback on this, but ultimately the other aspect as well is I think that this does have benefits in terms of minimising vegetation impacts that maybe the first option doesn't achieve. And on top of that as well, the access doesn't go towards the frontage of someone's property. So in terms of dealing with headlight issues or vehicles manoeuvring out of their driveways, this is a better option from that perspective. And then option 4 was, well, what if we don't have an access at all? So basically what that would assume, and I'll just go back to this slide again, would just mean that there's a single access point at the far eastern end of Melaleuca. And again, we went through that process, and again, with the exception of the MFS, most of the other organisations generally supported it. So from Norma's perspective, generally the way that they've sort of communicated to us that they can access refuse collection is that they'll come in from Coshell and do a left turn and then reverse back. And just given the low volume of traffic that uses the area, it's quite a manageable movement for them. The reason why I sort of showed this 85 metres is that the length of the cul-de-sac actually exceeds what is generally desirable for a cul-de-sac, unless there's an actual turnaround provision. But again, in this particular case, we've consulted with the important parties that actually need that turnaround, and they've more or less said that they can manage that situation. And this is irrespective of whether it's option 2, 3 or 4. You still got that situation. But effectively, that's effectively what Norma's saying, is that they can manage that. They can just reverse back. There's only about 2 or 3 properties that they need to service. So while it's not technically meets the standard, they can still effectively manage and operate. So we have to make decisions based on what's practical rather than not always just meeting something exact precise. So look, option 4, I've gone and said, look, it's manageable. Some of the things that were flagged was that, you know, potentially it does add a little bit more traffic or consolidate the traffic onto one end. Look, we've undertaken a lot of traffic counts as well in that area, so we have a really strong understanding and appreciation of how much traffic actually uses that space. And look, in my view as well, I don't see this as being an area that's going to really, attract any additional traffic. There's no, I suppose, desire for people to use it to go from one spot, or say from Carlton Road to Lyndoch Road. It's quite a circuitous route to get from one spot to another. So I don't see it from that perspective creating any additional traffic. But obviously how people access Coshell Drive and Hammerford Grove might distribute a little bit. But the volumes on those streets were less than 200 vehicles a day. So the amount of traffic movement between that is not going to be considerable. That's a very small number in terms of traffic volumes. So putting all of those agencies, I guess, responses combined, in addition to mine as well, my recommendation is to proceed with option 3, which is having an access on Carlton Road, roughly about 35 metres from Coshell Drive, which, if I go back, is this option here. So again, we see this as being one, it's not going to change the traffic behaviour too much. Secondly, as well, it provides that safe separation from the roundabout. that we think will be safer for people to use. And again, going through the consultation process with emergency services and Norma, it's an option that they're generally quite supportive of. Now, while I haven't presented options around, accesses closer to Hemmerford Grove, while it's impossible to sort of see on this screen, there are actual accesses that will go into the Springwood subdivision, or like similar locations to there. So again, it just introduces a location where you end up with a lot of intersections close together, which we're trying to avoid. We're trying to come up with a solution that minimises the amount of nearby intersections, or certainly ones where there's a lot of traffic. And again, just for the reasons above, that's why we're sort of recommending option 3 as the preferred approach. Now look, going forward, there's a few steps to go in this process. So during May, this is where we've undertaken quite a lot of technical analysis and rigour to end up with the conclusion that we've ended up with today. So today we're obviously doing the information briefing session to inform yourselves of how we've landed on that as a preferred option. But we're looking to undertake engagement very soon. And that engagement basically involves notifying residents that reside on Melaleuca Drive. We're keeping that exclusively to residents that reside because based on the advice that we've received, that the residents of Melaleuca are probably the most materially impacted by the proposed changes, and we want to make sure that those are the voices that we're hearing when we put this out for consultation. And that consultation period, look, I put a date for 4th of June. Now this obviously relies on us collecting, I suppose, having all the information prepared and ready to go. So whether it goes out on the 4th or the 5th or the following week on the 8th, we'll get it to residents as soon as we can. But I suppose that we just want to give residents a reasonable opportunity as well to provide some constructive feedback for us in that time. We also need to undertake some notification through the local papers as well. So we're also on top of that. So then during that time, I suppose we'll then analyse all of that feedback, and then we'll have a report for the 28th of July where we'll run through the outcome of that feedback and the final recommendation. Because ultimately, the reason why we have to make these changes is to facilitate safe access from the roundabout, but we want to do it in a way that, again, provides a reasonable outcome as well for the community. So look, that largely sort of concludes the presentation I've gone through today. Yeah, more than happy to take any questions.
Do we have a current timeline on the roundabout itself?
Look, I don't have a timeline on the construction because I suppose that's a little bit directly out of staff's hands. I suppose in terms of the design of the roundabout, we're sort of at around sort of 50 to 60% detail. So we're sort of anticipating that we'll probably have the design complete, within about 3 months. But we don't have an exact timeline on the construction just yet. We're hoping around, but I probably can't put a date to it. We can probably maybe take it on further notice.
Oh, good. And my other question was just, do we, in terms of the Springwood development and where their exits and such will be for, the stage 9, I think is the one that links to it. Do we have an indication of that at the moment?
We've certainly looked at it in relation to this assessment. I might refer to Andrew to provide more broadly on stage 9.
Yep. Okay. So stage 9 is Kelton Road. Stage 8 is the road that has Macmillan going through it down to Schomberg. So stage 9, you're referring from the roundabout towards the service station, are you?
Yeah, I was just so looking at the map, you could see that the proposed route sort of is opposite a bunch of where all the trees got cut down. I'm just curious about knowing where they might put an exit might help with.
Yeah,
our understanding?
yeah.
Well-
It's, so, based on the stage 9 plans that we have, most of the houses are going to be fronting onto Carlton Road.
Correct.
I think there's only one access point that's going to come in off Carlton Road. That's going to be located a lot further down the road. So sort of towards Hemmerford Grove is where that's probably going to be, thereabouts.
Yep. That's correct.
Am I able to get you to just give us a little bit of a refresher on that roundabout and numbers, capacity-wise, etc., on why this is our preferred roundabout location, how it links into Cheek Avenue and the like, and what our modelling's showing with growth? Are you able just to touch on that a little bit? Just
Going back to this roundabout here.
that's it. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, look, there's probably a lot of factors that goes into the design of a roundabout. So like traffic volume is one of those things, but there's also a number of other things like nearby services, Stobie poles. Because at the end of the day, when you design a roundabout, you generally want to try and cost manage to come up with a roundabout that meets the intent and purpose of what it needs to achieve, but also being mindful of where existing services are. Now, in this case here, I suppose the roundabout is located at, well, the idea is to try and safely find an intersection treatment for Cheek Avenue and Carlton Road. You know, the roundabout can pivot a metre or two either way, but a lot of it is driven by where existing services are, so that you're trying to come up with a solution that's cost effective.
Yep. And volume-wise, how many cars are we sort of planning for again?
So in the long term, so you know, this isn't tomorrow, this is
Of
talking
course,
like
yeah,
2050. Based on the state government's modelling, it's around 15 to 20,000 vehicles per day.
Yep. No, perfect. And my only other comment, so option 1 sort of being similar to what, you can see that blue line there. And this is personal opinion only, can be completely wrong. But the only reason why option 1 seems a bit more attractive to me, and again, take this with a grain of salt, is purely because each week we do provide bin collection. And it was the most preferred Norma one, and it does actually provide an entrance into Carlton Road that's the closest to what those locals would be used to at the end of onto Cheek. So that alternative to me just is standing out the most, and again, take it with a grain of salt, but I do try to look at it and I go, well, if we've got a garbage truck driving in Melaleuca Drive, heading down, picking up the bins and driving out, that's probably one of the most constant business activities that we will be taking every single week. Don't get me wrong, I do note SAS's concerns. I'd like to scrutinise that a little bit, because a fire truck, and MFS said, you know, that's manageable, but an ambulance said no. But the residents that live on the street, that's the least amount of difference, I'd say, in relation to where they're used to exiting. And then it also does provide the opportunity for any heavier trucks coming down for deliveries, whatever, not to do any U-turns or turn around. And that's the only reason why I'm looking at that one going, you know, is that the alternative. Do note the cars shining into the future allotments, so I certainly understand that. Then the other question I had was around Cockshell. I noticed we're offset from that, so it's not a straight cross. I'm sorry if I missed it, but was there a reason why we would want people sort of turning and then coming in, or straight across, no good from a traffic engineering point? It is, yep.
All right. No, I'll break it up, because there's probably about a few questions in there. So, look, the first question in relation to, you know, why didn't we just run with the access that's located where it is now? So you do raise a good point that it's the closest location relative to the existing access point on Cheek Avenue. There are a couple of other detriments that may not be visible from here, but I imagine as well that you know, that there's still things that we have to consider. So the first one is let's see if see if I can sort of point. Is this the clicker? This one? Yep. So can you see where my mouse is?
I can, yep.
Yeah, so it is feasible from a sightline and access perspective, even though it's quite close relative to the roundabout. But one thing to consider is that if you're standing at this point here, you need line of sight back to here. So there's a big impact on vegetation, not just today, but potentially what you can plant in the future as well.
Okay.
So that's one thing that is sort of part of that decision process is that it can be feasible, but to generate that line of sight, there are residual impacts that would occur from that.
Yep.
Look, while we obviously get feedback from emergency services, and that does play a part in the decision, ultimately, we look at all the information holistically and we make what we think is a reasonable determination.
Of course, yep.
So in this case here, it technically meets, but then I suppose the other thing is that we have already received preliminary feedback from the community as well. Look, some are generally supportive of it, some aren't, and some aren't obviously for the reasons that you might have mentioned as well, which is if it's close to a driveway or close to an existing access, there's limitations around that as well. So it's a bit of a balance.
Absolutely. And the red dotted line, I now understand exactly what that's trying to show. No, absolutely. And if we go to option 2, was it?
3 or 2? 2. This one?
Yeah, so this is directly across, but this is the one that we're saying from a traffic engineer doesn't quite, so we'd rather that offset to allow, okay,
Yeah. So there's 2 reasons behind that. So the first one is the creation of a 4-way. I suppose acknowledging that the traffic volumes on Coachella and Melaleuca Drive are actually quite low, so the relative level of risk is quite low. The other factor to consider as well, bear with me, skip it, here we go, the Stobie pole.
okay.
And it's just going to create a problematic or tricky situation for us to design around without relocating it. And the cost of relocating a Stobie pole is quite substantial.
Yeah.
So that's also a factor in that decision making too.
Perfect, thank you.
The other question you had around the offset, now look, again, you have a good point as well that, look, it obviously staggers the intersection, and if you want to get into Coachella, then you're kind of doing a left and then, about 40 metres down the road doing another right turn. Look, for the amount of traffic that uses the road and the amount of traffic that we forecast, which will probably still remain very much the same, ultimately having an access there we don't think will necessarily slow down residents' ability to get around to where they need to go, whether it's towards the town centre or sort of out towards Carlton Road, towards Williamstown. So it's about having that sort of balance. If we didn't have an access at all, which is this one here, then it basically forces residents to go all the way down to the eastern end before they can go back. And that was a little bit of feedback that was echoed along the way as well, particularly when this was presented in the Concordia Infrastructure Scheme, which was the left-turn slip lane, because I suppose there was a perception that you couldn't get out and you had to go back the other way. So there's a lot of factors that come into the plan decision making.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think option 4 I think that's a no-go anyway. And also with the offset, I guess you do take away the more chances of a T-bone sort of incident occurring, because it's like a traffic calming without. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I was just going to ask you to clarify, Richard, in terms of the option 1, going back to that, which the Mayor raised, is it worth just making some comment about the other challenge you're going to have with that, which I presume would be that it's so close to the roundabout, given the strong north-south tasking, if you like, in terms of volume of traffic, it could be very difficult to get in and out with the queuing you're going to have at that roundabout out of driveways in Melaleuca, which would make it quite challenging, I would have thought.
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly, oops, I got it on, yep. Yeah, look, I mean, from my perspective, even if the traffic volume was, say, 15 to 20,000, like this, I'm sure this probably isn't the first intersection that's close as well to a roundabout. Like, there's probably other examples that you could probably find. Probably right that, again, it's unideal because you got, if traffic's traversing from the roundabout, the way I like to put it, and you probably made a good point, Andrew, that if you're exiting the roundabout, generally people exit a little bit more at speed. So the perception of obviously having an access, or if someone's driving ahead and then they want to turn into the street and you've got someone behind them wants to go straight, the risk of rear-end collision does increase a little bit. Now, look, it's not substantial. And again, it's not the first example. It's going to be a 50k road long term. So the level of risk is quite low. I think it's, again, the other impacts that come from it as well.
Richard, it makes me think of the Williston roundabout with the 5 access points there, and that does regularly, as Brian will say, have bringles with people, with the confusion of people with so many access points. Just to take you on back, the dates of your consultation, I understand you've got some scope in there, depending on what happens in the next day or two. I'm going to presume that we will hand deliver that information to the people on Melaleuca Drive rather than try and post it, just for speed.
Yep.
So it should turn up as a hand-delivered document in their letterbox.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Richard. Just 2 questions quickly. Going back to option 1 there, obviously there's getting rid of the trees, ignoring the environmental impact. Does that have some acoustic effect as well in terms of noise from traffic?
Yeah, it's probably hard for me to comment on that one without being an acoustic engineer. Happy to take that on notice, and we can get some advice on that one.
That's fine. Thank you. And second one was just in regard to option 2. Are you able to just run through the impact on Coshell Drive there? Just because, and the reason I ask is, you've said that we're just consulting with the people on Melaleuca Drive, but is that because it's envisaged that option 2 would have no impact on Coshell Drive, and there would be no increased volumes that would go up there if we did adopt it?
I might just jump in there, Isaac. We're not consulting on option 2. We're actually going to be consulting on option 3, and that's the reason why it's Melaleuca Drive people. We're not intending to consult on this because the advice is that this is not a viable option to deliver because of the Stobie Pole location and the fact that we're creating a new 4-way intersection which we're trying to avoid. So we are only going out on option 3.
Oh, yeah, my apologies. Okay, so
Just option 3.
Okay,
Yep.
which makes... Okay.
So the key is a little small for me to read it, but that green bit, is that open space or is that just vegetation? Yeah, that vegetation.
Vegetation.
Okay.
Trees.
And the bit below it as well, on the walking path? Yeah.
Correct.
And will the west end of Melaleuca Drive merge into that walking path?
Which one?
There. Yeah, will it tie in to, you can walk from there to there?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe a silly question, but if we're just going to Melaleuca Drive residents and only consulting on option 3, how does that consultation happen? Like, e.g., we're doing this thoughts, or are we showing them options that or explaining options that we're not accepting? Like, why are we consulting with Melaleuca Drive if we're just doing option 3?
So under the Road Traffic Act, we must consult with affected residents on a proposed road closure, which this is. The preferred approach is to go out with the option that is proposed for the outcome to get residents to provide feedback on that option. What we're wanting to avoid is optioneering in a community consultation process when other options have been discounted through advice. We are formally consulting on a road closure under the legislation, and that process is presenting an option.
But is that not So, how to word this? So,
The fait accompli.
the legislation tells us we have to consult. So now we're doing the minimum of what we have to do and telling them what we're going to do because it's the recommended option. Because I understand that, yes, we need to consult, but we're just putting forth option 3. Is that making sense? Like, I understand that the road closure does call for consultation, but we're just going to inform them that option 3 is what we're...
Yep. I think I know what you're asking. Is there, in the consultation piece, is there a bit of narrative where we can say our recommended approach is
Yes.
option 3?
Yeah.
But just for your information, we went on a bit of a journey to get to this.
Yes. That's what I'm getting to.
There
Yes.
was option 1,
Yeah.
there was option 2, there was option 4.
Yeah.
These ones have been knocked out because,
Because of these reasons.
Absolutely.
Yes.
so we'd really love your thoughts on this.
Yeah.
Does that help?
Absolutely. I
Much
think,
as we've had tonight.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So
I think that's
certainly,
important.
certainly as part of the consultation, we'll acknowledge that we've looked at all these other options, and here's the reason why we're presenting option 3 as
As a preferred,
a
yes.
preferred option.
That's right.
But we've looked at all these other options as well in consideration for this.
Absolutely. But in the consultation process, you might come across residents that turn around and go, I understand how you arrived at option 3 because you guys are the professionals in it. I still think option 1 is the preferred, or the option 2, or close it, whatever. We still need to provide an option for those residents to say, I understand what you're saying, but I don't agree option 3 is the preferred.
Yeah.
That's okay.
And that is okay because that's consultation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like during the consultation period, you know, we take all the feedback that we can on this, and you know, if we do receive the feedback, again, we've provided what we think is a pretty strong reason for providing option 3 as a recommendation. Look, we understand that some people may not agree, but there also might be some that do, and we're also of the view that wherever you put the access along Melaleuca Drive, there's going to be a varying degree of agreements and disagreements on it. So it's one that we'll balance up, and we'll certainly look at all the feedback when we receive it, and also again look to try and you know, take on board some of the constructive feedback as well we get from the community.
Oh, of course, because I mean,
Yeah.
the process here could technically be that the options come back with the recommendation, but the chamber might disagree for whatever reason, and process of chamber and local government in general. That said, option 3 I understand, and you know, hopefully we can sell it out there in the community, but ultimately these decisions are what the community will live with in the end.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think it's just important to note that in consulting with the residents, we thought that it was important that we looked at it from a technical perspective, and that we did the consultation with emergency services and Norma first, as opposed to not having that advice beforehand. We think it's important because that's also shaped our decision tonight as well. So by going through that technical rigour.
Look, I don't disagree. If I lived in one of those houses, I would have said, what did Norma say?
So
Yeah. No, perfect.
yeah.
No, thank you.
All right, excellent.
No other questions? Beautiful. All right, over to Tori for the next briefing on the community engagement. 5-minute break, done.
My turn, I know. probably have to worry about more of that than I will, but I'll just be inside with Wim, just, you know, doing the entertaining thing while he does the art stuff, but I'll give him a bit of help with the garden, you know.
Sounds like it.
Comes in handy. Yep.
Sounds like he knows people on the...
Oh, yeah, I think all of his mates are tradies, so it's not, yeah, all across it.
Got 3 daughters.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say you need to be short on him. Training's going on. Go a bit, yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm surprised Josh doesn't come over more. Pretty good. Usually he is a bit sort of back.
I think he says he doesn't.
Yeah, yeah.
Just don't.
Photos that I'll start mentioning about it.
That's right.
Don't want to hear about it.
It's really good. I like it.
Yeah, yeah, he loves it too.
People are so
Yeah, yeah. Pet party.
But yeah, they all are like coordinate 10 trees.
I know sometimes you put judge book rights cover sometimes, don't you? But you can't, no. A lot of them are very lovely, yeah. I've met a few of them, they're really good. Alright. Yeah, probably not for a bit, hey?
Penny's little boy's already kicking and punching and stuff.
I was out at home, Josh was like, I need to get him like a little kitty set, because he tries to be down. Thinks it's the best thing ever. Yeah, the rough house, I'm sure of it. Stressed me enough the rest of my life, probably, but.
Sounds really good.
Yeah. No, I
Cul-de-sac, right?
I love it. Yeah, I'm not a cul-de-sac too. I love a cul-de-sac. It seems quiet. And we had, I know, previous to us living there, it's right near it. So like, that was just one. So he's got his one side of the road, and the other side doesn't.
I'll say there's one person. The older ladies have festive Thursday ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does make it a bit more close to nothing sometimes, doesn't it? I don't know.
Yeah, we had to ban it on Fridays and Saturdays because they come home at 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
Only allowed to take one bottle.
One's a level of, it's churchy but not, not over the top. You know, you get a bit of balance.
What are you covering?
Community engagement policy.
Ah, cool.
To update the community engagement policy because that was. Update that policy. Okay, obviously.
Five-minute break, shouldn't we? Well,
It needs to be retained.
Option 2, master. Option 3, I got on bias, right opposite my property. Bloody ridiculous. Particularly when my option, you don't have
You'll have their attention.
Yeah. I was gonna say, we're good to go? Yep. Perfect, cool. All right. Well, now that we've, and I think most of you know who I am. I'm Tori, I'm Council's Digital Marketing Officer, but engagement has recently also become part of my role, which is why I'm coming to talk to you today. So today I'm talking to you about the draft Community Engagement Policy and its alignment with the Community Engagement Charter. So a bit of background. In December 2025, the South Australian Government introduced the Community Engagement Charter, replacing the previous public consultation requirements in the Local Government Act. The Charter applies to all SA councils and changes how community engagement is undertaken, setting clear expectations and minimum requirements. It means councils will now adopt policies that align with the Charter's framework and principles. So overall, it forms part of a broader local government reform designed to create a more consistent approach to community engagement across all councils. And I also want to mention that the state government has done extensive consultation on the Charter itself prior to releasing it and councils developing their policies. So previously under the old structure, there was a prescribed minimum requirement that applied regardless of the nature of the project. So these included that it had to be a notice in the local paper, had to be published on the council website, and we had to invite submissions for a minimum of 21 days. So under the new charter, engagement requirements are based more on the level of significance of the decision rather than applying the same consultation requirements to all matters. So the charter has different engagement levels, which are inform, local, standard, significant, and significant plus, I like to call it, with corresponding minimum requirements. So as you can see on here, the only requirement that is across all of them now is that it needs to be published on the website. So now not all projects will require a newspaper advertisement unless they are significant or significant plus. And not all projects require a 21-day engagement period necessarily either, unless we choose to, of course. So engagement can be proportionate and to the scale of the impact of the decision. And more significant decisions, such as the annual business plan and budget, will still require a more extensive engagement like we've done in the past. So nothing changes with those ones. The biggest change is the move from a one-size-fits-all sort of consultation approach to a more scalable engagement framework. So the Charter allows requirements to better reflect the significance and impact of each decision while still ensuring that major decisions receive significant community engagement. This doesn't mean that we do less engagement, but it just allows a bit more flexibility on how we engage with the community depending on the topic. Sorry, yep.
Apologise. There's, with the seek and consider feedback from community significant, which straddles the two, significant and significant plus.
Yep.
How is that different from seek and consider feedback from the community for standard and local?
This one's stolen from LGO, so I do apologise. Seek and consider feedback from the community.
Just trying to work out, is there a difference in the type of?
It's
Yeah.
It doubles up.
I think it might be, related to maybe the form of feedback that's given and how we give it back. So I know with significant and significant plus, we have to feed back to the community how their feedback was taken on board by council.
So the word significant is the key difference?
Yeah.
And there is a definition about?
Of the significant and the other one?
Yeah.
And the significant, the other one is literally just about the annual business plan and budget, essentially, and the rating.
Making a lot of sense.
Okay.
Sorry.
Not very clear, sorry.
No, I'm a bit
That's all right.
confused.
So I think that they still, so essentially with the annual business plan, that actually used to be specified in a section of the Local Government Act. So it used to actually be under section 123. And I think because they actually only wanted one, this is my take on it, because they actually only wanted one charter and one set of legislation that specified it, I think what they've actually done is that's why they've actually created that significant, like they've put the annual business plan and that separate to another significant, didn't treat it as a significant. Because if you actually look at the charter and compared to what was actually in the legislation, rather than, it's probably not as prescriptive, but essentially the requirements under the new charter for the annual business plan is exactly the same. They're just not prescriptive in the sense that under the Act, for the annual business plan, our public meeting had to be at least 21 days after the notification in the paper, whereas under the charter, that specification to sit there and say that the public meeting had to be held at least 21 days after the notification is not there. So we still have a requirement under the charter to either have a public meeting or we could do it in council meeting. So from that perspective, so I think that that's why they probably made that distinction between significant annual business plan and significant, so they could still have that criteria, but it's actually all covered under one section of the Act rather than two sections of the Act, because the public engagement is under section 50 of the Local Government Act, and so they've, rather than having the annual business plan requirement specific under section 123, they've put it all under 150. Does that sort of,
I think we might be talking about two slightly different things. There's the headings. Thanks for the clarification on the headings. Underneath, there's a seek and consider feedback from community, and there's a significant one and there's a non-significant one. What's a significant consider feedback versus a non-significant consider feedback?
I think it's the way that the feedback is invited. So you see under significant and significant annual business plan budgets, we're actually inviting written submissions. So it's about sort of how we analyse and how we're seeking and considering the feedback, compared to if it's a standard local, it might just be, you know, maybe a short survey or something like that. So it's the nature of the information we're seeking from the community, I suppose.
Okay, so we should say something different, yeah.
Is this diagram out of the charter, or is this something we've created ourselves?
No, this was LGA that created this one.
Don't look at me like that.
I think essentially, I think that the confusion is where, not that you can see where I'm pointing,
Yes, I
but
can, yeah.
that seek, realistically, that seek and
Should
consider
just go the whole
feed
way along, yeah.
should
Yes,
actually go
yeah.
across all the way rather than splitting the two.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So essentially that's what I think that they're trying to say. So realistically, if you actually look at it, it's all in one line, that for every other bit other than when you're informing the community, you have to seek and consider the feedback from the community. I think it's just the distinction that line
Is it trying to show different stages?
should be all the way across.
Is it trying to show it in different stages then, or is it?
No,
Not
it's not in
stages
different
at all.
stages.
No,
No,
okay.
I think it's just
No.
breaking it
So
down.
I just think that that should be, so I think essentially if you actually looked at it, so essentially the website is across everywhere, the news publications, we only have to do it for the annual business plan and what we would consider significant projects. So I would use a significant project being the structure plan, potentially. For significant and standard, I'm not going to separate the significant plus. So significant and standard, we have to consult the whole area. And it's interesting that the question between invite submissions versus seek and consider, I suppose that's a bit of a terminology thing, but I would say that the seek and consider feedback from the community is probably across everything, across significant plus significant standard and local. So I think it's just a diagrammatical representation that line should probably go across to all up to the end of the local.
And a public
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
We can, I can get a bit more information on that for you if you like.
Go, you go. I see, I've got a simple thing that explained decision process should be across all 5 as well. But, you know, I accept that this is something that perhaps the LGA has put out.
Yes. I mean, it is still based on the charter itself. So this is what's identified in the charter as we have to do. But obviously, as council, we can decide to obviously inform the community across all levels.
I think that's a very good point.
Yes.
This is the bare minimum,
Yes,
which this
the bare
council
minimum.
will exceed
Yes,
in its
correct.
community
Exactly
engagement.
Right. Yes, yeah.
Seriously.
All right, so this sort of touches on that. So the minimum standard versus meaningful engagement. So the charter sets a minimum requirement, which this minimum requirement is to follow the legal minimum level, which is those local standard levels that I talked about before. The required consultation process associated with it and the legislative obligations, but council can obviously go further than this. So we can increase engagement where appropriate based on community interest, the project complexity, local impacts and opportunities for collaboration. So for example, an engagement on a local road, for example, like we were talking about before, at the moment we must place a public notice in the newspaper, have it on the website and have a 21-day engagement period. Whereas under the new charter, we would be able to change it to a bit more of a targeted approach if we chose to. We could still go out to the whole community, but we can target it a bit more specifically if we prefer. It would still need to go out on the website, but we could sort of more target the relevant groups rather than engaging with the whole community if it wasn't relevant to the whole community per se. And on the other hand, if we have a project that's of extremely high interest to the whole community, such as the structure plan that Sharon was talking about before, we would do the minimum requirements set out in the charter, but we would also look to seek a range of other ways to engage in addition to this because we know how important it is to everyone involved. So I want to talk a little bit about engagement fatigue on this one a bit. So we believe that this may also help a little bit with engagement fatigue that we sometimes experience when there's many engagements happening at the same time. Because under the charter, for some matters we only have to engage locally, we may not see it being broadcast to the whole community like it is currently. And ones of significant interest will only go out to the whole community. Yeah.
And I think that that's actually important in relation to sit there and say, and like I know that potentially people are going to get potentially, oh, you know, what does the charter define as significant, or what does the charter define as standard? But I think, okay, yes, we can. The charter goes down and tries to do that. But I think also under this sort of scenario is to sit there and say, I think as councils, when we actually have matters that come forward and we have to, and we go through that consultation process, I think we have the flexibility to define what we believe is a significant, a significant matter. Because I think the issue is with a definition, a significant matter for one council area versus another council area can be quite different because the definition of what's significant to an area is probably built around what their areas of interest are, and we all know that different communities have different areas of interest, so the significance of that. And I think that this is where the charter and the way we're proposing to structure the policy, and where we actually have that more flexibility and proposing what we actually think the consultation for the matter, given the matter, is a bit more flexible, rather than sort of saying, yes, I agree, Helen, that we will probably go above the charter, but again, it's to sit there and say, actually, do we want to, I suppose, within our policy, do we want to be quite rigid in the specifications of where and above when we go in the charter? Because there may be some circumstances where we may create a situation where we've, by virtue of how our policy, we've made it rigid, that we may overdo the the engagement because it's not necessary for the matter. I suppose that's where that judgment call of what's significant and what's not significant.
Yeah, I hear.
And they need to be. It's not. I suppose it's not necessarily the engagement. The way we engage isn't actually going to be a one thing fits all type stuff. It is that flexibility of creating that uniqueness.
I hear you. I think fatigue comes more from timing than quantity. And I think what the danger that we do as a council is that we decide what we think the community wants to be consulted on. I actually think it has to be the community who decides what they would like to consult on, whether it be a council agenda right the way through up to a business plan, a strategic plan. So I think we need to change our mindset to say, a member of this community has the right to be involved and be consulted on anything at a particular level that they wish to come in on. So that's my problem, is that this comes from a very council will make the decision about what you should have the chance to consult on, rather than the other way round. So it's just a different perception, and it comes from I have actually worked in this area for a while, and I came onto this council because the perception in the community, and we've just had it again tonight, is that we're being too controlling. We are limiting the information that people want and not allowing them to come in and say right or wrong, what they would like us to hear. So we've got a problem, and I guess we need to work really hard on how we address it, because it's really critical. And this is really, the rest of the world has actually moved a lot further than local government in community engagement. We are seen to be well behind the ballpark, so keep going.
So I want to talk a bit about why we've had to change the policy. So the policy has been simplified because many of the requirements now sit directly within the Charter itself. So we've changed it to align with the legislative engagement levels, simpler and a more streamlined structure, removal of repeated content already included in the Charter, and a greater focus on Town of Gawler specific processes and responsibilities, such as the list of the engagement activities we may choose to do, which was listed in the policy. And we're going to be more flexible in how engagement is delivered.
Explain a little bit, more flexible. What do you mean by that?
It's sort of what we were talking on before. We sort of get to have a bit of a choice on how we go above and beyond in regards to community engagement. So we have a basis of, at certain levels, we have to post it on the website, and we have to do maybe a social media post, but then we can also choose to add it to the newspaper, or we can choose to do other community engagement elements above and beyond what the Charter says. Does that explain it? Yep. But it's sort of up to our discretion, I suppose, rather than it being set out. Yep.
But is that making sure that the engagement program and the engagement, I suppose the engagement plan that we prepare is actually relevant to the type of engagement that we're actually going to do, rather than having to sit there and say how it was quite prescriptive to sit there and say, this is how you had, at a minimum, you had to have 21 days, you had to have it in the newspaper, you had to do this, you had to do that. It's more to sit there and say, actually, realistically, on local issues, when you're doing it with a small group, having it out for 21 days actually also elongates the process, which isn't actually benefiting for the community as well, because we have to allow that 21 days where essentially it may be quite a small group, so we can actually do that direct communication, and potentially we can sort of sit there and say, actually, because of the local area and the local nature of it, we actually may say, oh, actually, we think that 14 days is maybe is long enough, because the number of people that we need to engage with, and we can actually probably, the method that we engage with them may be more personal, so we can actually get the feedback a lot quicker, so then we can actually consider the feedback a lot quicker, and then we can actually, you know, make the decision or not make a decision, because we might not end up making a decision based on the community feedback. We can actually do that quicker, as opposed to the stock standard thing of everything has to be 21 days, so you've got 21 days and then you've got... So that's where it's that flexibility. But again, the same scenario is to sit there and say on significant matters that we know that are actually quite significant and that we're trying to get a whole big broad people, we may sit there and say, actually, we might do a 6-week consultation, or we might do a 4-week consultation, because we know that we need to make sure that we grab as many people as we can, and the matter is of such a significance and to the whole community. So that's where that flexibility, that's the type of flexibility that we're actually talking about, rather than just having this stock standard thing about like the stock standard 21 days. You know, so... And
I think where I'm coming from there, we have so many fantastic events. You know, we've got the Carol, we've got the Anzac Day, and the Gore Show, and all this sort of stuff. And the community doesn't give council much feedback. I've never seen reports about the feedback that we've obtained back from, you know, the community or the people that attend those events. I mean, I asked a couple of questions to the Apex Club recently, how many people attended the Apex Club? Bloody good, there's a hell of a crowd there, you know, and things like that. The same with the Show Society and that sort of stuff. I think we could do it a bit better. We're going to support these events. So we spend a lot of money and support them to make sure they're successful. But are we doing that the right way? And is our community saying, thank you, council, we know that the rate money now is being spent in the right way to promote what should happen? I've never, in the last 10 years, I don't think I've ever seen any feedback from events that have gone on, or, you know, hell, we had a whole pile of people come the other day, yeah, they said this and said that. And one other little thing while I've got the floor is that when the rates are sent out, that's when every bugger in the community says, oh, look at this, bloody rates. And in it, it's got something about the youth or something that's completely immaterial to what council is doing. And I say that sincerely, because if you want a questionnaire or something, and if you want the people in that stage of mind, when they get their council rates, right, that's when they'll sit down and they'll send it back. You know, because they're in that mindset, kill the rates. What do they do for me? And I've said to you others, I don't understand why we don't utilise that, because you could fit probably 10 A4 pages in one envelope. It will cost you exactly the same to get the right information that we want to get to the player. And we know what we're going to get. You know, what can we do better?
well, I'll just sort of say, Brian, you mustn't read what's in those envelopes, because we are required to send a summary of our business plan with those rates notices. So on that first rates notice, so we do that, and I think it is that response of some people like that stuff that comes in paper, but a lot of people still get it electronically, even though that they actually have access to that information and all that paper copy. And a lot of people just will pick out the rates notice and then they'll chuck everything else in the bin. I don't know what the answer is to do that. In relation to gathering information from events that we held, yes, we can do that, but it's just a virtue of getting people out there surveying on that information. So I think that sort of information, that sort of engagement is a bit different to what this policy covers. So this policy covers more so when we actually have to, when we're going out to the community, when we're actually on projects or decisions that we have to actually consult under the charter with that with the community what's the minimum requirement that we actually need to do with that. So there is a bit of a slight difference, but yeah. But you're right, we don't, you know, people very rarely are vocal when they agree with what we're doing. It's only normally when they don't agree with what we're doing when we actually get that feedback unsolicited.
All right, so I might go through the timeline a bit, but I might just skip ahead quickly. I probably should put these in a different order, just for a bit of context around the timeline. So it looks a little tight when I show you the slide back, but the Community Engagement Charter was released in December 2025. However, the LGA only released its model policy and commenced formal communications with Council in late March of this year. So this means there's been a bit of a limited window to interpret the guidance and prepare our draft policies. So yeah, we recognise again that community fatigue can occur with several engagements happening at once, but the implementation of this timeline is quite fixed, which you'll see here. So at the bottom up, so at the moment we're sort of in the policy development internal stage. And then this will have to go to the next council meeting in June to be endorsed. And the engagement period after that, for it to be adopted in August. And this is because it needs to be adopted by the 11th of September to be applied by the 11th of December with a 3-month transition period between policies. So it does look tight. However, unfortunately, we don't have a huge amount of choice in the matter on this one.
Sorry, who set those timelines? Is that a legislative requirement?
The 11th of September is the legislative requirement. So we've worked back from the release of the information to sit there and say, as Tori said, so basically, so it was released in December 25. LGA provided some training and provided some the guidelines on what the model policies should be reflected, which essentially was a replication of the charter. And then that's
and then we have 6 months to get it done by, under the LGA Act.
Well, under the Local Government Act. So yeah, so implementation is so essentially they had a transition period of 9 months from December 25, and then it was a bit of that new legislation. So then the industry from an LGA perspective we're looking at it and what it meant, and then that's as Tori said, you know, we got that. I suppose we got that advice that we rely on LGA for from in March, and so since then we've been working on it as to determining whether we want to just, you know, replicate the charter, which we sort of sit there and think, well, as a policy, there's no point in us replicating what's actually listed in legislation, and it's just that question about what are the things over and like, you know, we will comply at a minimum standard. And then these are the other extra things that we may do, or these are the things that would relate to us as a council, which are our methodologies and all that sort of stuff as well.
But we have 3 things already out for consultation in June.
Yep.
This would be a 4th.
Yep. Or we wait and we basically sit there and say, okay, well, we don't adopt it, we don't meet the legislative requirement. I suppose that's the other.
Well, it rather makes a mockery, doesn't it, of community engagement?
It does. It does because of that.
Yeah, it's not a good way to start, basically.
No, it does, but unfortunately, I think it's this bit of the storm of the fact that, you know, we've also got the election coming up and we've got caretaker period and all that sort of stuff as well. So it is that question about, and council is doing a lot of things at this point in time. So and I suppose that's a decision for council to make, whether they want to put it out to consultation when they consider the policy, when it's actually presented, whether we actually go out in June and July, or we do it later and then we adopt it at the September meeting, which will be a bit later than the legislative deadline. So I suppose those are the different options that we actually have. As well, if you sort of sit there and say, actually, well, we don't want, as a council, you don't want another engagement in June and July, we'll just put it out, we'll put it out in July, and essentially we'll, rather than present it at the August meeting, we'll present it at the September meeting. Realistically, from a compliance perspective, yes, we're slightly out of compliance, but it's not necessarily going to be that bigger. It's not a major non-compliance.
I understand tonight's an introductory process, but I would need to see that draft community engagement policy long before the 5 days of the agenda, please.
Well, it was sent out last week. It was sent out as part of the communique. That and the charter and the policy was sent out prior to this session. So,
Missed that. We missed it. Hang on.
So it's only, literally the policy is quite simple, it's quite streamlined, because essentially a lot of the stuff is, the charter itself is about 6 pages long, and the policy is only a couple of pages long, because realistically our policy statement says at a minimum we'll comply with the charter, and then we've actually talked about a few things about, to sit there and say these are the things that we'll actually engage with. So yeah, so the policy is not long, and
Trying to find it, sorry.
so it was in the communique.
Oh, yes, right at the end.
Yep. No. Obviously it will be reviewed each year, or reviewed when there's a major, not necessarily every year. We'll probably put it on a 3 years annual, regular cycle, and then if there's any legislative changes and all that sort of stuff as well. So, so it's been circulated. So.
Anyone else got any additional questions?
I guess just, well, more of a comment really is that the policies can only do so much fundamentally you need to have a genuine interest in hearing what people have to say, and if you don't have that, it's just a bunch of bureaucratic stuff that we work through. So I think as long as we have the heart of what we're wanting to do, I'm happy with a looser structure. And if we're going with a very rigid system because we're trying to force community engagement to occur, then it means that we're off on the wrong track from the beginning. So I guess that's my comments.
And I think that, and that's a good point, and I think that that's where, from our perspective, we probably just need to be, when we're actually putting a report up to go out to community consultation, I think that we probably just need to strengthen up what the actual, in the report, when we have that community engagement, we probably just need to actually be a lot stronger on what we're actually doing for that, what is our engagement plan. So you're considering the subject matter, but also the engagement plan at that point in time as well. And that's where you can actually sort of sit there and say, oh, actually, no, we think that this matter needs an extended consultation time, or needs to be treated as a significant item rather than a standard item, because obviously on some matters you might be closer, because realistically as council members you are that, I suppose you're the community engagement officer realistically on the ground all the time, so you might have a bit more intel than we have with regard to some of the information that we've actually as we go through that process. So that's where we probably need to do that better from that engagement perspective, because you're right, our engagement isn't actually our policy. Our engagement is actually the process that we actually do when we actually go through that that engagement. So I think that that's probably where some of the concerns about, oh, okay, are we doing it just for a flick and tick, is including that engagement plan within those reports. Yes, Nathan?
Yeah, look, I can certainly get the sentiment, and I sort of understand how it was a one-size-fits-all, because that probably avoided the scrutiny in the past, because you'll do everything the same. The things that I've seen this council do really well is when we've turned around and said, hey, we've implemented the bare minimum, but we're also doing this, and this. So kudos to the team for doing that on particular projects as well. But it would be cool to be able to see some of those engagement opportunities and understand what the baseline is, because it's interesting, because if we turn around and we say the discretion, and the discretion is on the significance of the item, and the item is then judged on the significance of the staff member it falls into their portfolio, and that experience, connection, whatever else.
I beg to differ. I think that essentially the determination of the significance is based on a combination of the staff recommendation and the council chambers.
Oh, no, sorry. What I was trying to talk about was the baseline significance is then put through into the report and tested out with council members, whether that be in an information briefing or whatever. That's that collaboration piece that we preach and talk about, because it's really easy to look at a capital project. And if we look at a capital project like Pioneer Park Wall, $1.8 million, right? Who do we engage, or who are we telling about that? Who do we want some feedback from? And then we talk about a $25 million development in a sporting precinct. The two groups, or the two bits of population that you might actually target, are completely different, but the two capital projects are completely different. However, it is still capital works that council are going to carry out. So having a bit of a lens or a bit of a policy position where you actually do provide a little bit of guidance, but getting it into the decision makers and how we actually see it in the chamber, it would be great to understand. And as you said, Sharon, we actually unpack it a little bit. But not only this is the recommendation where this is the baseline of consultation and here's where we're recommending to go above, but also providing a couple of other options and say, we did think about this, testing it out and whatever else, because it would be cool to be able to really flesh out how we engage on certain items, because it doesn't work as a one-size-fits-all. I think local government have proven that throughout. And then the other comment, and this is probably one to take back to Garrock as well, I think that lag in the December to March has really set up their members for not the best process here. Because to take Councillor Hennessy's point on engagement, and now seeming like we're just trying to get it through, even though I'm sure we'll do a great job. It is one of those pieces where it's like, yeah, we're trying to get it through, done before the election, because we want something locked away for engagement, so we do need to push it through. We don't really care about the numbers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's just a personal comment. One to provide feedback on, potentially.
Yeah.
By us, by me, by council.
Just two questions. The first one, I guess the policy that we have currently, how close is that to the draft LGA policy which came out? Is it, you mentioned that was not a very helpful document.
Yeah, it's significantly smaller, R1. Theirs did a lot of sort of copy-paste from the charter. They copied a lot of elements directly from the charter into their policy, which we just didn't see as being necessary because, you know, the charter exists for a reason, our policy exists for a reason, they're separate. We refer to the charter in our policy, however, we just didn't feel the need to double up on that content and sort of overwhelm it, essentially.
Just for the benefit of everyone in the room, I've got the policy in front of me now. And the policy essentially says, yep, whatever the state government said, that's a given. And it is literally half a page, and I'll read it out. It says, council may undertake engagement activities beyond the approaches outlined where it is considered appropriate to support meaningful community participation. I think that's what Sharon was alluding to, where there's all the prescribed stuff, and if you look into the LGA's website, the government's website around the engagement policy, it actually gives specific examples of what significant standard, local and inform are. That guides you through all the prescribed stuff that council is required to consult on. And then the policy here says, depending on the nature, scale and significance of the matter, council may use one or more of a combination of the following methods to inform and engage the community. Online engagement via website, media releases, comms through local media, council website, social media digital, council letters and publications, direct correspondence with the residents, property owners, etc., advertising in print, digital, broadcast media, community forums, information sessions, etc., surveys, questionnaires, displays, at the libraries, presentations, pop-up engagements. So my read on it is our policy is simply saying it's the state government's requirements, but if we want to do something different, we can.
Yep.
Yep.
And the council can decide.
Basically, we'll comply to what they're saying we need to do, and then we'll do additional to what we
That's the policy we're asking you to
think fits.
consider.
Yeah.
That's it, isn't it?
Yeah. So essentially, and that's where it's that thing about the fact of we just need to be more prescriptive when we're actually presenting information on matters that we want to go out to consultation, out of our policy and out of the charter. What have we actually selected to sit there and say that we believe that this is the best form to actually engage in with our community?
Yeah. So it might be, for example, that in the council report, where it comes to communications, it might say recommended as per the charter or something.
Yep.
Or recommending that we go as per our policy, which is above the charter, and we're recommending X, Y, and Z.
Yep. So yeah, so it's just more about, rather than just saying, oh, okay, well, here's the report, this is what we've done, and we're going to release it for engagement. We'll just be more specific and to sit there and say, actually, it's an engagement report. So the crux of that is the actual engagement plan as well.
So to understand where this fits between the public engagement policy versus our public consultation policy, like what's the...
So the public, so essentially the existing one will go.
This replaces.
This
the
replaces
public
it.
consultation policy.
This is the new this is a new one.
It's just
So
got a
this is the
different
new
title.
one. It's
Yeah.
just
Okay.
yep.
Okay.
So essentially the old one, our engagement policy or engagement
Public consultation
Public
policy
consul-
previously was.
is actually going.
Okay, yeah.
And this is replacing it because as part of I think the part of the charter of what the state government done, it was to sit there and say it's not consultations, it's all about engagement. So it's just a bit of terminology change, but our existing policy that we have currently will disappear and it will be replaced with this new one, which is based on the charter.
In terms of the terminology, I know Councillor Hennessy's mentioned...
Brian, sorry, Isaac's still talking, sorry.
In terms of terminology, and I know Councillor Hennessy's mentioned it before, but things like co-design I would think is quite important, whereas something is a co-design process versus a notification or a consultation in other ways. I mean, we have some brilliant examples of co-design which are happening where we engage prior and then we go out again. I mean, the Disability Access and Inclusion Plan is an example of what I would call co-design and the way that was approached. And I think that that's significantly different to some of the other definitions about consultation that we have in here. And I think that an articulation of that might be welcome in a policy like this.
Yep, take on that board, yep.
It's Mike Wayne's working. Some of what Isaac was just talking about There's also more the strategy sort of and actions and things like that, which is different to a policy. So it may actually be a significant piece of work that council actually does undertake to actually sort of pull all that apart and actually work through it. So yeah, I think it's separate to the policy.
Can I just say too, one of the big things about getting our community involved, which I've always been on about, is that first there was Cody with the Facebook. Everybody watched his Facebook, and now we've got Chris and me, Nathan, and seems to be everywhere I go, they tell me about what council's doing, because what they're hearing from Cody, Chris, from me and Nathan, and that around the area. So it's obviously a new way of getting words out to the community. And the other day when on the email we got the new communicator with the, Jimmy still doesn't get it because he's not here tonight, but it has all the meetings, everything, the whole lot. That's improving all the time. Where I've got a bit of a problem when it comes to the point of the media, does anybody know how many bunyips are sold? The answer is probably no. But the Goyder Council, which I'm on I pay rates to the Goyder Council too, so I'm on their committee as well. And the surveys that they do is that they put them in to the producer and the Herald and those other papers. And then they get a feedback from those from every now and then, having something in there that the community will answer. It's quite amazing how it really does work by having what's going on. Probably you don't buy those other papers, but it's got Simone, especially in the Murraylands. It's got all about what the council's doing. And so that if they're buying the paper, then they can see what the council's doing. Now, when we spend a lot of money in our local paper, the Bunny, so 2 full pages, a couple $1,000, and that sort of stuff, and so forth, do we know how many of the people, and that, I said the other night, without a doubt, I've got people I visit nursing homes because they're older than me, but they don't buy the Bunny because it says it's a bit too dear. How do we get the communication of all the great work we're doing as a council? And this is the proudest time I think we're really moving forward, and I'm very proud of it, and so forth. And to get that communication out, is it from Chris and Nathan and Cody through these Facebook things? Is that the best way to go, or is it the best way to do it through printed media? And how do you ever look at surveys like that in what we're talking about here tonight?
I think with most engagements, we usually try and do a bit of a combination of all of those. I know for the majority, I mean, up until now, they have to be in the bunyip. So they definitely have been. And then, you know, the Facebook stuff's in addition to that. What do you mean by surveys, sorry, when you're saying that?
Sorry?
When you're saying about surveys, what are you referring to?
Well, you know, like surveys about the fact that if you're going to put a $1,000 advert in a paper and you know that there's only 6,000 papers sold, is that doing the benefit when we've got 14,000 households and 22,000 people in the town? And there's information we get in our mailbox, or I think I heard Councillor Hennessy say about getting things into people's mailboxes and things like that. Everybody reads it. Because nobody's got Outback Gummies anymore, they don't use it for that. And so you can read the information that's given out. And
Thanks for that, Brian. I think
I was just conscious of the time. I was just wondering if anyone had any other questions, because otherwise I think we'll finish it up unless anyone has any other questions or comments or...
We just, I had it in my head, and hopefully it comes to me while I'm speaking. Just to touch on a point, I think in terms of principles of community engagement, maybe Councillor Hughes is correct in saying that some of that comes through process. However, I think that to have an aspirational principle in there of talking about designing with people as opposed to designing for people is still a thing that which you would have in a policy like this.
Yeah.
Maybe not in the detail of specifically saying how we co-design, but I think it's a good principle to put in there. Just in terms of, I want to be careful as well, while it does rely heavily on the chamber of the day doing the right thing, I think that there's having certain standards and principles to refer back to when making these kinds of decisions and informing how much effort you should put into something is important. So I think that we need to be careful not to just rely on the benevolence of the chamber of the day with the policy, just as a general comment. And then it still hasn't come to me, but I'll email it through when it pops into my head.
And I think that's right, as well as to sit there and say, depending on the nature of the activity that you're actually seeking feedback, it is to sit there and say, actually, well, there may be situations where the feedback isn't actually a single point of feedback, and it might be that question on there is multiple feedback points that we are seeking, like, you know, what Andrew's been doing with the structure plan and how we... So it's the difference between, I suppose, that the option, are we doing community engagement or we're doing stakeholder engagement, and the principles are exactly the same. We just need to know, making sure that we actually understand that at some point in time we may have to do stakeholder engagement as opposed to that wider, as a prelude to that that wider community engagement as well. So, and I think that just comes back on all of us understanding what the objectives are we're trying to achieve out of, one, the delivery of the project, or the consultation, and why we're actually doing what we're doing, that we actually always need to have that sort of that thought process in the back of our mind, because it's not, you know, engagement is not in isolation of everything we do. It's not like, it's not that process-driven thing, and I think that that's the mindset that we need to actually take with this. And I don't think that we take, well, my personal opinion, I don't think that we take engagement for the sake of engagement. We are doing it for an actual purpose of whether it's stakeholder engagement or that wider community engagement as well.
And it has just popped into my head what I was thinking of before while I've been talking about that. But I think principles outlining, I think it touched on what Brian was saying before about the different methods, but just as an underlying principle, to have an accessible, like accessible engagement, make sure that it's accessible. And that can mean a lot of things. It can mean different mediums, but it can also mean that we have to slightly adjust things to make sure that certain groups in the community can do that, whether that's changing the date by 2 days to accommodate some change or some event or some new information, or it's a thing to do with inclusion and disability, where it is having something which is able to be engaged with in a way which actually meets people's needs. So I think accessible as a general principle could fit into there quite nicely.
And I think that is that thing about the fact of, you know, there is a mix of the community, and I'll sit there and say, Brian, I never look in my letterbox, so if anyone puts anything in my letterbox to tell me that something's happening on my street, I will not know beforehand. I'll find out on the day. I think my spiders will know more so. So there is different different methods for different people, whereas a lot of people will rely on the social media to actually get their information, or whether it's word of mouth, or whether it's all that sort of stuff. And that's where we need to actually make sure to sit there and say, actually, there's still parts of the community that do read the Bunyip, that do want print stuff, but there's also a whole heap of sections of the community that just get all their news and all their information off of Facebook and Instagram as well. So we just need to get that balance right. It's not one or the other. And I agree that, we do need to be cognizant of the fact that whatever engagement we're doing, it is accessible to as many people as possible. Yes, Nathan.
And the other point that I was going to make was just around that engagement process, and depending on the topic that we're engaging on, I could see us being in a situation where it's a minor situation, a minor thing we have to go out, but it does trigger the engagement process, and the discretion at the time might be, oh look, this ticks the boxes for the charter, so we'll go out with those. And I think when we come across those, we just need to be cognizant of the bare minimum actually fits here, but let's be open about that and say, hey, these things are what we're told to do, but it actually aligns with the topic that we're going out for. But if there's always an opportunity to go above that baseline, even if it is within the socials and whatever else, that does actually provide us that opportunity to say, here is the baseline, but we actually do strive to go above because we do have that appetite for engagement. I think that is a better message to send.
I think we just need to be probably quite clearer as well, as to sit there and say, realistically, yes, we're engaging, but essentially be quite clear on how we're receiving that as well, because I know that a lot of people think that, and I'll use social media, social media, yes, we can engage and we can inform, but if we're doing serious engagement, we're never going to take the comments on social media as feedback. So, you do notice that we are actually being quite more transparent on that, to sit there and say, actually, yes, we are engaging, and if you want to engage and provide feedback, these are the channels. Yep. And so we just need to be a bit more transparent on that. And we're not saying that because we don't want to engage. We're saying it's just that the medium you're choosing to engage is not the appropriate one when we're actually seeking formal feedback.
Yeah, I've noticed that, and I think it's excellent. I think that's a very good direction. And because it is. Everyone wants that instantaneous stuff now. So, but again, it is that again, it still needs to be in a controlled environment. So, anyway, so finally, can I just say, as somebody who I think has a reputation of reading everything, this is the second time I've missed information for an information briefing, and I know if I haven't read it, most of the people in this room haven't. So, putting it inside the communique without a bit of a flash that it was for tonight. Yep. I've looked at it and just gone straight past it.
Okay. Yep.
So it's not quite working.
That's fine. Yep. So we'll take that on board.
A link into the invitation or a reminder email might be helpful, because we can't have a decent conversation if we haven't done the pre-reading. So.
Yep. Anything else? No. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Sent out. Really.